Let's talk about how you can lose your driver's license for repeat drunk driving offenses in Michigan. If you are convicted of two alcohol related convictions within the course of 7 years, you are revoked for a minimum of 1 year. That revocation continues on for the rest of your life unless you go to the Secretary of State and have a hearing before a hearing officer at the Secretary of State who allows you to get restricted privileges back. So I had a person recently call my office who had been represented by an attorney who's advertising on the internet as a big DUI attorney. This person, this young man, he had a prior conviction out of Ohio, 6 years and 6 months prior to picking up a case, and was then charged with a misdemeanor OWI in one of our courts here in Michigan. In the meanwhile, he had flipped his license from Ohio up to Michigan. Now Michigan has jurisdiction over his driver's license. Had that young man maintained his Ohio driver's license, Ohio would do whatever they do, which is not nearly as serious as what Michigan will do. But because he flipped his license to Michigan when he moved up here, Michigan now has jurisdiction over his driver's license. He picks up this OWI charge and pleads it down to impaired in this jurisdiction where he's charged. The attorney told him before he took the plea, we'll try to get you a hardship license. That's not even possible. That's ridiculous. You cannot get a hardship license if you have two alcohol-related convictions within 7 years. That could be a high BAC, it can be an OWI, it can be an operating while visibly impaired. If you have two operating while visibly impaireds, you're revoked for a minimum of 1 year. If you pick up a second revocation, after that first revocation, you might be facing a 5-year minimum revocation before you can apply to the Secretary of State. Here's how it works. Once you've been revoked, it's not a suspension, it is a revocation. A revocation continues on indefinitely through the rest of your life unless you go to the Secretary of State and you prove, number one, that you are alcohol free and no reasonable likelihood that you'll ever drink again. Number two, you have to have letters from your friends and family that are notarized that substantiate your claims of sobriety. You have to have an alcohol assessment done by a licensed alcohol counselor who also supports the inference that you've been sober for at least a year and no reasonable likelihood that you'll ever drink again. And you also have to have a drug test done to establish that you're drug and alcohol free. You need to establish all of these factors before the Secretary of State will even consider giving you your license back. If you're an out-of-state motorist who's lost his or her Michigan driver's license, you can do an out-of-state petition, and you may get full privileges back because you live outside the state. You can also get full privileges back through the Secretary of State if you do a hearing, but it is extremely unlikely. In the vast majority of cases, the Secretary of State will order restricted privileges after you've succeeded at a hearing at the Secretary of State and order that a breath interlock testing device be installed in your vehicle. If you then successfully get through a year, then you can apply for your full privileges. Same thing applies with a 5-year revocation. 5 years is simply the minimum. But that revocation, again, it lasts indefinitely through the rest of your life unless or until you go to the Secretary of State and get your license restored. Now, what happens if you get a ticket while you're driving or while you're revoked? It resets the clock on your revocation period. So if you're on a 5-year and you pick up a driving while license suspended, 4.5 years into it, you've got no other tickets, you're just about there, you get this ticket, and then you go in and you plead it to no ops on person. Michigan Secretary of State looks at your no ops on person and they say, aha, that's proof of driving. Therefore, your 5 years starts all over again. So you need to be very cautious and very careful if you're charged with any driving offenses during a revocation period. Now, you shouldn't be driving on a revoked driver's license because if you're involved in a serious motor vehicle accident and somebody is injured or killed, you can be facing felony charges because you weren't supposed to be driving in the first place. There is one alternative to this whole complicated situation of trying to get your driver's license back, and that Only in rare cases, though, if you are eligible for a sobriety court program. Sobriety court is like an intense probation. It's a graduated process. It takes up to 2 years to go through the sobriety court program. But after 45 days, a judge is allowed to give you a sobriety court license. A sobriety court license overrides all prior suspensions and all prior revocations. So if you had a breath test refusal or a blood test refusal, that's a 1-year suspension. Then you were convicted and you've got a 1-year revocation. If you're involved in a sobriety court program, after 45 days, the judge can order a sobriety court license. That entails a breath interlock testing device in your car, restricted privileges, but it overrides the prior suspensions and the prior revocations. If you intend to apply to the Secretary of State to get your driver's license revocation reinstated, give me a call. We need to go over some things before you talk to the actual attorney who will handle the driver's license restoration process. If, for example, you tell my restoration attorney, oh yeah, I've been drinking still, he will not take the case. If you have a spotty record of relapses, it makes it more difficult. If you go to the Secretary of State on your own and you botch it and your substance abuse counselor makes inconsistent statements, or if somehow you apply and claim that you've been alcohol free and no reasonable likelihood of ever drinking again on your own, and you fail to get your license back and you get a DUI after that, now you've got credibility issues. There's a whole litany of issues that come up that I need to walk you through before you talk to the actual attorney that does the license restoration process. The license restoration attorney, though, is extremely meticulous, very thorough, and makes sure that your letters, your testimony, and your substance abuse counseling, that it all works together so that you can then get your driver's license back. If you satisfy the technical requirements that the Secretary of State lays out in its rules, then you should get your license back the very first time. If you're looking at other license restoration attorneys who say, hey, money back guarantee, and if you don't win the first time, we'll do the second time for free. Don't walk, run from that attorney. You should plan on getting your driver's license restored your very first time around, not the second or the third time. Every time you apply to the Secretary of State after you've lost a hearing, it becomes increasingly more difficult to get it back the next time around. If you'd like to talk to me, give my office a call and we can discuss getting your driver's license restored.